The last thing you want is an athlete thinking, I'm going to get this head start by driving harder, working really hard, getting a head start on my competition. In fact, I like to say in off-season, your barometer of success is not, and I double underline that, not chasing fitness in the classical sense. You're not trying to boost your FTP. You're not trying to increase your threshold run pace. You're not looking for your training to give you that validation. Instead, the reason it's preparatory in mindset is that you're actually strengthening the tendons, muscles, and ligaments.
You're listening to Endurance Unlimited, a TrainingPeaks podcast for athletes and coaches, no matter what you're training for. Dial in those workouts with deep insights and cutting-edge science from the most prominent voices in the endurance and hybrid sports world.
We are here at TrainingPeaks headquarters chatting with Matt Dixon, an elite triathlon coach and co-founder of Purple Patch Fitness, author of The Well-Built Triathlete and Fast Track Triathlete, former pro triathlete who's trained multiple world champions, and industry thought leader about his approach to the off-season. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much, Alison, and thanks for having me, TrainingPeaks. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Can't wait to jump in with you today about this great topic. It's the off season here in the Northern Hemisphere. Racing season is wrapping up, and now athletes are wondering what to do before the start of next season. So I am so curious to hear about your approach to the off season. First of all, maybe about your definition of the off season itself and the value that it brings to athletes.
Well, I think that the most important takeaway that I could say is it is a phase of training. And so many athletes just turn their back, think it's time for a break, and all of that is understandable. We do want to get some rejuvenation. We do want to get some freshness. But I would actually define it as the single biggest predictor of athletes making breakthroughs in their upcoming year. And so that's why I define it as a phase. And if I was going to sort of lock it into a single word, it would be one of preparation. That's really it, putting the building blocks in place. And so that's how I would sort of define it, as it were.
And going to that, what do you believe is the key value that it brings to athletes?
So getting it right is absolutely critical. And so let's first put athletes at ease. This is a time of year where you should have big mental and physical rejuvenation. You should have a lower focus or commitment level to the sport at large. You should have much greater flexibility, and also you should have capacity to focus on the other parts of life. So in a classical off-season lens, all of that rings true. It's very, very important. At the same time, as we are far away from race demands, as we should appropriately reduce our training focus and our actual total training hours, it provides an opportunity. And that for me is putting many of the building blocks, the foundational elements in place. And we'll go through it, but those include some of the habits that you do, some of the skill development, some of the strength and conditioning, and also priming the body so that when you emerge from off-season, whether that's in the new year or a little bit later, even for some athletes at the end of January, middle of February, the body is prepared to ramp up training when you double down on commitment again and successfully absorb the hard work that is a requirement for you to go and have great breakthroughs, whatever your goals and aspirations are, but without getting injured and be able to optimize the returns. So that's why we call it foundational in element. That's why we call it building the sort of platform of performance as we get ready for this.
Wonderful. So maybe instead of, framing it as the season of simply taking off and doing, whatever you want to do, we're really looking at this being more of a foundation to build upon for next year.
Yeah, when athletes finish their last race of the year, I think there is an important moment, typically somewhere between 1 week, maybe 2 weeks in duration, where you simply turn your back off everything. where you just go, boom, okay, I'm turning my back on the sport. I'm just going to go and have at it. And if people love to go and party or whatever it is, that's fantastic. A little bit of excess is good. But we understand and we consistently see where athletes go wrong is when they go what I call rogue, when they go random. And it has implications, interestingly, not just in their physical development as an athlete, but it tends to create a little bit more of a chaotic life in broader life. So a lot of athletes have been really committed. They're getting ready for their events. They finish. They go into off season. They just say, okay, now I've got to give back. I've got to give back to my profession. I've got to give back to my family, without the understanding that actually the framework of training, it helps them organize their day. It actually creates a system in place that drives effectiveness. And so when you remove that completely with zero structure, typically it actually ends up leading to people be less effective and more frustrated. And so it's almost like a tent peg in the storm in a way, the glue and the foundation that becomes really, really important. So when we think about this, it's yes, we want to make sure that it's highly flexible, but there are some things in off season that you just as an athlete will never get to really be able to focus on when you've got looming deadlines, when you've got races coming up. It's very, very hard to develop positive habits in the broader, what I call supporting cast, proper sleep habits, nutrition habits, etc. It's very hard to do that when you've got a race upcoming. It's very difficult to truly think about technical development or skill development or even getting used to new equipment when you've got a looming race. So when you depressure that, when you're not chasing and you're not through this race-specific mindset, it gives you capacity to do some stuff that's really fun, that's pretty time efficient, but actually can set you in good stead for the year ahead. And that's how we look at things, I would say, in off-season broadly.
It's great. So talking about these like foundational pillars, the skills development, the habits, the recovery, and whatnot, can you go into a little bit more detail about exactly your philosophy of what those key pillars are?
Yeah, in many ways, it's how do you actually unlock consistency? And this goes all the way back to where I was leading the Purple Patch Pro Squad. We had a team approach, and we put many of these practices and habits into place. And they were very, very important. But we found that the off-season was the time to actually establish these. And if we could establish these upfront, and then typically it was a much higher likelihood that the athlete would maintain them as training ranked up. So let's go through a few of them. We have a system of weekly planning at Purple Patch, which we cutely call the Sunday Special. And all this is, it's a very simple process, but it takes about 30 minutes every Sunday. And we have the athlete or the busy professional that we're working with plan ahead their week. So what are our life non-negotiables when I'm taking the kids to school, or maybe I'm going to spend time with my family, or I've got a dental appointment? The second thing is then, what have I got to do in my professional life, my work commitments, and you build that. And then thirdly, how do I integrate all of these habits, including my training, into that life? And it's a very simple system that tends to be the unlock of athletes feeling like they're under control, that they have clarity on what they're going to focus on, and they get to sort of prevent that competition that occurs through our training commitments and life commitments. And so that's a core practice that right now we have every single Purple Patch athlete dial in. Because once you have that as a habit, it's the unlock. A few other simple ones that we like to engage, we'll talk about strength, but strength training is a priority right now. Very, very important for the broad range of athletes. We like athletes to think about daily hydration, something that's a stress processing tool that helps our immune system, that ensures we have greater energy and cognitive function. So we have athletes really lock this in on a day-to-day basis, because what we consistently see is athletes outside of training often tend to walk around like dried sponges. You don't want that. So these are very simple practices around nutrition, recovery, downtime that just puts intentionality behind them. And so the interesting thing is none of these are complicated. Any of them stand alone. If I said, oh yeah, we have athletes think about fueling after their workouts, most people would say, well, obviously. But many athletes don't do it. So this is the time where you can build these habits. And quite often it's really good to do it in conjunction with others as a part of a team or a squad or friends, hold each other to account. Once you have them in place, when we then ramp up, which we have to ramp up the training focus, ramp up the demands, increase our time commitment to this stuff, we've got a bedrock of really good habits, and it helps you stay healthy. It helps you stay under control, and it's going to optimize the return on your training investment. So that we spend a lot of time in off season doing this, and it sounds incremental almost, but it's actually really fun and really valuable, and it gives people a sense of empowerment. I think that's the thing that really helps. They feel like, as a general rule, that they've almost got, I always hear, I've got 100-hour head start into next year. And so I've got this acceleration because I haven't gone rogue. I'm not starting from zero. I've got my habits. And organically then, I want to train hard. And that you do it at the time and the body's ready to absorb. So that's sort of some of the basic core fundamentals we look at this time.
I love that. So this is really what consistency then looks like in the off season, isn't it? It's not about heavy training loads. It's about dialing in those key habits that are going to allow athletes to make the biggest gains come the build season.
Yeah, in fact, the mindset around this, and let's help athletes make it really actionable. Imagine if you typically train 12 hours a week. In off season, for most athletes, you shouldn't be training 12 hours a week. You can actually radically reduce it. We typically encourage athletes as a bellwether, middle of the curve, sort of rule of thumb, about a third less training. And you'll be amazed. So you get 5 hours back in that time. And that training, a lot of it should be flexible, fun, free. There is some specificity around there, and we'll talk about that another time. But that gives you capacity. The last thing you want is an athlete thinking, I'm going to get this head start by driving harder, working really hard, getting a head start on my competition. In fact, I like to say in off season, your barometer of success is not, and I double underline that, not chasing fitness in the classical sense. You're not trying to boost your FTP. You're not trying to increase your threshold run pace. You're not looking for your training to give you that validation. Instead, the reason it's preparatory in mindset is that you're actually strengthening the tendons, muscles, and ligaments. You're making sure that how you are riding your bicycle or swimming or running or whatever your sport is, riding a gravel bike, you're doing it really well with great posture. And you understand how when you do build the physiological side of things, the capacity, the functional threshold, everything else, that you're equipped to actually leverage that fitness to its best ability. That's what race performance is. And so, it sounds like we're talking about like there is a lot to this, but generally it's a much lower time commitment. It's much less cognitive load. A lot of the training is not fatigue inducing. A lot of it's soul filling, as I like to say. And you can go play a lot. But, and it's a big but, whenever an athlete maintains structure, whenever they maintain that magic word consistency, and they pair it with good habit formation, they genuinely are miles ahead of themselves if they had have just gone road, gone patchy, done random stuff, and then when they hit January go, oh my goodness me, I need to get ready. I've got a race in April or whatever it is. I need to accelerate. And then, of course, what occurs is athletes ramp too quickly. The body can't absorb it. They start the injury cycle that so many are cursed by, and they never yield the benefits from their hard work that they are doing in the current year. So that's why we talked about this as being such a foundational element, the biggest predictor of breakthroughs in the coming year. I think it is the common predictor of anyone that up levels dramatically is a great, well-executed off-season. It's the truth.
Amazing. Tell me, how does a coach fit into all of this?
Well, it's very, very difficult for any athlete to navigate the journey of performance progression alone in a vacuum. Many listeners might have heard the metaphor of a basketball player. It's very, very hard to see yourself in the game when you're doing the action. The athlete's in the weeds. The athlete's doing the doing. And it's very difficult to retain personal perspective. On top of that, as you're navigating, I think a role of the coach in off-season is to help the athlete first look back and review the last season, and then be partnering, strategizing what should the focus be now. And of everything you could focus on the off-season to try and develop, you can't develop and improve everything. So a coach should help you filter out distractions and help you prioritize on things that are going to give you the biggest performance returns possible. And then as you go along that journey, the coach is there as a sounding board to help hold you to account for those focus areas that you're really going to try and drive on, and support you along the way, give you lots of feedback, give you guidance, and keep your mind on the mission. And so a coach is, for me, a coach, the least value of a coach is the prescription of a training program. That's important. You want the program to be right. You want it to fit into your life. But the true power is when you have a partnership to help you navigate the journey, to help you focus on the right things for you in your situation. And that's where a coach has someone that's got a lot of wisdom, typically, a broad range of athletes they've worked with, can understand you, and hopefully can really communicate with you in a way that works for you to ensure that you're doing the things that are going to help you be successful. And so a coach has a critical role. In my mind, I say as a coach, it's probably the number one investment that people can make.
If athletes aren't convinced now, I don't know what will convince them. So any pieces of advice to athletes of how to adopt the mindset needed to turn the off season into the most constructive training phase possible?
Okay, I always say this: you can have it all. And this sounds counterintuitive. The natural fear, and I get it, is hang on, am I going to get burnt out? If I'm really focused now, am I going to lose motivation? Am I going to lose commitment when it really counts next year? It's going to be so much easier to just turn my back. And that is the easier path. And in fact, it's the intuitive part quite often. If I have a break now, then I can turn my focus back to now. But in anything in life, whenever we break through and we really succeed, the magic word is consistency. And so when done right, you can turn your back on the sport and have a really good rejuvenation, where success is in January, February of next year, that you're refreshed and you're eager and you're excited. So you can do that. You should focus more on other parts of your life, professional, family, friends, etc. And you can do that. You can go and do other stuff. If you were a triathlete, it's a great time to go and hike and gravel bike and anything else that you love to do, cross-country ski, that all fits in. And this is a time that you can have some real fun. You can focus on some areas that you can develop, either strengths that you want to build on or weaknesses that you want to shore up. And you can set the foundational elements in a low time commitment that's going to put you miles ahead, that's going to make that journey more stable in the coming months, more under control, integrate with other aspects of life, and ultimately make it more rewarding. And so it is an investment in yourself now that's going to make things easier. It's not just about going faster, it's going to make your life easier. And so if you can dial that in and say, yeah, I do want to have freshness, I do want to have recovery, and I also want this, that's the appropriate off-season for you.
Fantastic. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on strength training and how strength training acts as a cornerstone of the off season.
Strong like bull, Alison, strong like bull. It's not without irony that we're going to talk about strength as it relates to off season. My mind always goes back to my years of coaching professional triathletes. And I will remember, I don't share this too often, but we had a set of common practices that I called the non-negotiables, our basics, that every pro athlete that I coached as a part of our team would adhere to. And one of them was year-round strength training. And this was the time, it's not very long ago, this is the 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, 8, through to, all the way through 2020 when I stopped coaching pros. But in the early stages of that, as a coach, I remember being vilified because at the time it was an incredibly low percentage of elite endurance athletes that were doing any type of strength and conditioning. And many coaches out there were saying, this is a complete waste of time. It's a terrible ROI. The sport has evolved so much. Our understanding has evolved so much. And I think that we would be hard pressed to find any professional triathlete that doesn't adhere to some form of strength and conditioning year round. And I think it's an important grounding as it comes to when we think about strength training in the off season. For me, why do we care so much about it? Well, there are many elements to it, but I'll summarize it: because it makes you faster and it helps you become more bulletproof as a human. As an athlete, you're going to get taken out of the game less. You've got greater functional capacity. It's hugely valuable to you as a human being. Stress processing, body composition, functional capacity in life, a key element of longevity, has a huge implication in our broader life as well. And the challenges for many athletes that despite all of these benefits, performance enhancing, keeping you more resilient, improving the quality of your life and your health, despite all of these, it's really, really tricky when you are getting ready for your endurance-focused events with all of the sessions that you want to get in. It's still so often an afterthought, a last thing to the party. So for me, off-season is the time that when we have lower endurance training demands, we're not getting ready for races. This is a time that you want to have behavior modification, where we can bring this forward in our priorities. You can make it the bullseye, if you want to call it that, and start the habit now. And whenever we see athletes successfully build traction in the off season, they're much more likely to be successful of integrating it year round. So this is why, for me, strength is the building block, pardon the pun, of off-season, the very central thing that we want athletes to establish, adhere, or accelerate and bubble up in their priority list, I would say.
It's great. I'm very interested in knowing exactly what strength training should look like in the off season to you. What do those protocols look like? What are the priorities?
It's I don't want to say it depends because it's not quite true, but I think it's important to for us to establish that the important part of strength training and any training to be valuable is for the person to start from their start line. So you might be listening to this and having never done strength training before, and you might be a keen endurance enthusiast that runs every day or goes and does triathlons, but hasn't yet integrated. And that can look very different than someone that is doing it year round and now wants to sort of take it to the next level. The truth is, whether you're starting with movement patterns, so in other words, just using your body as the resistance and maybe a little bit of bands, and you're starting to build up from that lower starting point, or if you've been doing strength year round, we want to progress to heavier resistance. So strength training does include putting your muscles, tendons, ligaments under load. It's very, very important. And so what that means is when we think about strength, and I'll go through the different components that we think about under the BRIG umbrella, but what it isn't, and these things are valuable, there is a place for them in people's lives. But when we think about just Pilates or yoga or those, or just a group exercise class, they're good, they're valuable, but that's not enough. That's not what performance-driven strength is. On the flip side, we don't have to get a membership to a big box gym and think that we want to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're not doing that. But there's sort of different components to it. The first is what I would label overall athleticism. So stability, coordination, core strength all around. So looking for the body's overall athleticism, moving in multiple planes, a little bit of leaping and bounding. That's really important. Number two, we want to put tendons, muscles, and ligaments under load. So that might start with bands. It might start with body weight. It might move to heavier bands. It might move to real weight. Ultimately, it should include real weight, where you are putting external load on the bones, on the muscles, on the tendons, on the ligaments, and it should drive greater strength. And then we also want to have elements of overall stability work in the 360-degree planes. So most endurance sports are pretty linear. They go in one direction. We want the athlete to be globally very strong, multi-plane in our strength exercises, and include ultimately, as we go along the journey of strength, converting strength improvements to power, to better recruitment. And if you package it all together on a cohesive journey, the output is the athlete has the ability to retain good posture, understand where their bits and pieces are, all of their body are in points in space, be better coordinated, be improved in their movement patterns, have great neurological conditioning. So in other words, getting their brain to talk to the body really well, and have a platform of greater strength leading into power. And that's what we're looking to do as a strength program. In the off season, it's just the first chapter. We start from the start and we put the movements in place first. That's what we think about.
Lots of things to consider, that's for sure. How do you keep athletes accountable to their strength training in the off season? So, thinking about those athletes that really just want to kind of, take a true break or go rogue, as you say. How can you keep them accountable and show them the value that strength training has, that consistent strength training has?
I think we've unpacked yet another Dixonism of going rogue. That's going to be our off season. That's going to be our TrainingPeaks purple patch off season cue. Don't go rogue. I think for this is where coaching is really valuable as well, and that's having a partnership of ensuring that athletes don't just turn their back on themselves and allow all aspects of their life to become more chaotic, because their exercise routine, their training routine becomes really random. That's what we mean by going rogue. So we want to first think about, what does success look like? So why are we doing this right now? And if you paint your vision of what you want out of your commitment to sport, and for some people that could be winning a world championship. For other people, it's like, hey, I want to get across the finish line for the first time. Other people might say, I want to leverage this sport so that I feel better and perform better in life. There's a broad spectrum, but let's define success. And then let's establish why strength and conditioning is so important now. And the reason it's a very good time, as I mentioned before, is that our focus and our dedication to the endurance elements of our sport can be reduced appropriately this time. So we don't need high specificity and we don't need massive hours when it comes to our core part of our sport. That's number one. So therefore, we have greater cognitive load and actual practical time to emphasize this. And the way we talk to athletes about it is appropriately. Let's take a triathlete, for example. In the middle of the season, when you are getting ready for your half Ironman, your Olympic distance, your Ironman type race, your bullseye of training is swim, bike, and run. So they are the core constituents of what you're getting ready for. If you're a marathon runner, of course, it's running. You might have some multi-sport elements sprinkled in, but it's running. If you're a cyclist, it's cycling. And that's great. That's important. When it comes to the off season, for almost every athlete, it's very, very hard to think about anyone that it wouldn't be this. We flip it upside down. And what we say is your bullseye is the strength and conditioning. At least 2 sessions a week, these are your non-negotiables. These are your key workouts. And now what we do is we wrap the other stuff, the endurance elements, around that strength training. And that shift of perspective really, really helps. This is not an afterthought. It's not a luxury. This is a non-negotiable. And in fact, if you have an athlete, or if you are an athlete that says, I don't want to listen to this English guy rabbit on about off-season and its importance, I'm going to take a break. The one thing, if we can get one thing for an athlete to do, is to say at least 2 hours a week, single sessions, at least that commit to strength. That's your first step, your primary step, and for every human being, you should do it. And by the way, if you want to turn your back on the sport, if you don't want to focus on off season and take this advice, as a human being, if you want to process stress, remove some of the aches and pains, improve your body composition, boost your energy, one of the two things that you can do that are a non-negotiable, the best medicine we have, is strength. And so forget about sport. This is important for us globally. So we have a lot of conversations around those lines, and we put it first, very much first. Every purple patch athlete, the first thing on the program is strength in off season. Then we wrap around with the remaining hours, giving lots of capacity to have time with family, friends, and fun and professional. But strength is the first thing. And when you prioritize it like that, adherence goes up. And of course, once the athlete starts to feel the benefits, it doesn't take long. Then they don't want to turn their back on it, because every athlete that adheres to it for just a few weeks says, oh my goodness me, I can see how this helps. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there any specific tools that you use for strength training that you would recommend to other coaches and athletes?
Well, the biggest tool, and without making it an advertorial for TrainingPeaks, but the absolute biggest tool for us is the new Strength Builder that you have. And what we've done, just to share what we do at Purple Patch, we coach people globally. So we have athletes here in the Performance Center that I'm in right now in San Francisco, but we also have athletes all over the world. And so how do we deliver the most intuitive and best strength training where we can help them adhere to the exercises in the safest way, in the way that we want it to be done, while they're in Kansas, while they're in London, while they're in Geneva, while they're in Rio? So how do we actually do that? And we've done a couple of things. We actually spent some time here, and we're very lucky. We have a center that's very good for content production. That's why we designed it. So we've actually recorded 250 of our own videos that we've fed into the TrainingPeaks system. So we can curate and develop these workouts that are structured and progressive for all of our athletes so that they can go on the journey. We also go one step further and do a produced video. So 30 to 40 minutes for people that are training from home, that can have almost a personal training type session by video. We do that. We just do that for our athletes to go the next level. So that's the first thing. I would also say for athletes or coaches, and we did this as well, by the way, my core competency as a coach is not strength and conditioning. I understand its value. I'm a clinical physiologist. I've been in the sport for a long time. But by definition, there are much smarter people than me around strength and conditioning, creating programming, making sure that it's appropriate for both broader life and endurance training. So engage with those people, have conversations, help them build your programming. Don't feel like it should be a burden for you. I've, in this field, surrounded myself with so many experts and just ask questions. Right now in the center, we have 3 or 4 strength and conditioning experts that build our programming. And then I have a review, quite often saying, that looks good, because I understand and I trust that ultimately they're better than me. And so I would encourage athletes, don't just go to a strength class. Don't just make it up or download a program. If you can, reach out and look for guidance of support, or get a program that's specifically designed for endurance athletes that include the elements, heavier resistance, a lot of compound movements, something that I didn't talk about before. So you're not just doing bicep curls, but you're doing overall body movements with weight, a lot of core stability and coordination work, all infused in a program. These are available. There are some great experts out there. Engage with them so that you can be doing the right thing with confidence and you've got structure. No different than it would be if you were going to build a training program for cycling or running or triathlon, etc. So it becomes a really critical component.
That's great. Wonderful. And the hope is that that those of you listening will have that program in TrainingPeaks so that you can follow along your workout and check off your exercises one by one, so that it's very streamlined and easy to follow.
I'll add as well, Alison, it's so easy to just take it to the gym and or do it from home, and because it's by exercise, pretty soon it's a trained component. But we can see, one of the things that we use the TrainingPeaks tool for, I will add, is adherence as well. So we can see of all of our athletes, even our athletes on the more autonomous program that we have, Tri-Squad, we can see if they're doing the actual sessions, not doing it, and we can check in and say, hey, you haven't done strength. So in off season, we bubble that up as accountability. We chase our athletes, what's going on, even if they don't have a dedicated individual one-to-one coach. So that sense of accountability is really, really helpful, either for yourself, checking it off, or of course, if you're in partnership with a coach or as a part of a team. So it's an incredibly powerful tool, and it's very, very simple to use, which I like.
Fantastic. Any thoughts about maybe your top consideration for athletes with strength training, the number one, piece of advice that you would give them?
Establish the habit now, but do it year round. And, so many athletes are successful at doing it in this off season. And as soon as race demands bubble up, as soon as training in the more classic core competency sport, swim, bike and run, if you're a triathlete, etc., starts to take up time, it falls through the cracks. Here's the reason that you should do strength training year round. Here's the best sell. It makes you faster. That's why we do strength training. It is a performance enhancer. So yes, it does make you more resilient, strengthening tendons, bones, muscles, ligaments. It is a preventative tool in the basket of helping athletes stay healthy. By itself, in a vacuum, it's not injury prevention, but accompanying other elements, yes, it will make you healthy, and that's a good thing. But from a positive standpoint, well, it's going to make you feel better and perform better in life, but it's going to make you faster in your endurance training, or endurance racing, I should say. That's where we really care about. So how does that happen? Well, firstly, it's a bedrock of strength and power production that'll help you maximize those high intensity intervals that you do. So it's a gateway, not a direct gateway, but a platform gateway to help you maximize your endurance intervals to boost your power production. That's good. Number two, it's really good for resilience, so staying power. And that's a great element. And finally, if you're doing longer distance racing and you start to have fatigue accumulation, it helps you retain form under fatigue. So that's the component. We care about not just power production over the course of endurance activities, but we care about economy. Strength training is scientifically validated, proven to boost your economy. And so when things do start to turn to custard, you get to retain your pace or power. And that is a performance enhancer. And so if you want to know the reason why, it's good for your health, it's going to help you more resilient, but most importantly, it's going to help you go faster. And that's why now is the time to really lock it in.
I would say most athletes want to go faster.
It's a common thread. And you get to enjoy it more, and that's good.
There you go. Exactly. I would love to hear more about what you consider to be the challenge mindset.
Yeah, we talk about challenge. One of the things that we love athletes to do is take on a huge physical challenge. And the majority of people that we tend to work with are very busy, often professionals, huge amount of competing demands, often with family, friends, very robust social lives. And so their probably most precious commodity is time. And they have lots of challenge in their life, a lot of professional challenge and stuff that comes in broader life as well. So they're not lacking challenge. But one of the things that we consistently see is when we take performance-driven people, often professionals that are performance-driven, and we pair it with a physical challenge, something magical occurs. And it's how they see themselves, their performance, not just in their sporting endeavor that they're going to take on this physical challenge, but in broader life. And it just creates exponential performance gains across all aspects of life. And so at this time of the year in off season is sort of the time that we really encourage athletes to say, when you're at this time next year, who do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? And this is a great time to not stay in your comfort zone, but actually get out of your comfort zone. Because when people get out of their comfort zone, that's when they grow. They not only start to develop many of the physical practices that can help improve your energy and cognitive function in life, but that becomes the place out of our comfort zone that we get to ignite, hone, and develop so many traits that are necessary for us to perform across life. You become more resilient, more adaptable, better at coordinating and collaborating with people. You get more effective and efficient. And so these are aspects. And so this is a part of the reason that we love athletes now to say, put a stake in the ground, go and do something that you're not even sure if you can accomplish. And when you do that, it's a physical challenge. It has to be a physical challenge. It changes people's lives. And I just think that's a pretty cool thing.
Amazing. How would you say that you would give advice to athletes to pick the correct challenge for themselves? Because I'm hearing, striving for something, pushing for something. What's too much and what's right?
Yeah, it has to be in the bounds of reality. Yeah. So we have. I love athletes to take on things that they've never done before, or start to commit to a goal that they maybe feel is a little bit crazy, and it's important. But there's a broad spectrum. We work with a wide spectrum of people at Purple Patch, from people that are currently sedentary. And so the way that I always explain it is, it needs to be the right challenge for you, not your neighbor, not your friend, for you. And the key thing is to first really be reflective of, what's my start line? Where am I at right now? This is your comfort zone that you're in. That's your start line. And what you want to do is you want to commit to something that is a little bit scary, that induces a little bit of fear, that sense of, oh my goodness me, I'm not sure if I can do that. And yet, if you commit and you follow through, then you can be successful. So for somebody that's sedentary, that might be saying, I'm going to hike up to the top of the mountain at the top of my in my town. It might be doing a 5K, but for someone else, it might say, this is the year that I want to go and qualify for Boston. I'm half an hour away, and that's what I want to do. Or maybe try and get onto the podium in my triathlon, or do the first time Ironman finish, whatever it might be. But it wants to be something that with commitment you can be successful. That's the progressive element, because going through, the real reward of this is when you do commit to something and you follow through on it, the outcome is hopefully success. And with that comes pride, satisfaction, great joy, a reason for celebration. But the real reward is the journey. Because by taking on a journey that is realistic in nature and takes you towards that journey, so that's why it wants to be realistic, you're going to get not just a boost of energy, higher cognitive function, but you're going to live through experiences that enable you to perform across much more in life. Because all of these experiences is the great trainer of the brain. All of the mindset traits that high performers share. And so when you consider this, don't just pick the biggest thing out there. Pick the thing that's actually a little scary to accomplish. And the final thing I would say, ensure that it's realistic in the structure of your life. So if you're busy on a hugely demanding time and you've got twins under the age of 3, it might not be the time to tackle an Ironman. You want to put the challenge in the context of life so that it's not battling across it. And that's the spirit that we see. The common thread, though, is that it's a physical challenge. That's the catalyst.
Wonderful. Curious to hear your thoughts on when a person should commit to this challenge, when they should select this challenge, if this is a New Year's resolution challenge, if this is prior to New Year's so that they can get started with training more quickly. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the common thread of this is the more time that you give yourself to do it, the more integrated it can be into your life. And one of the biggest mistakes that occurs is people navigate the holidays, they come out new year, new you, and say, let's go. And one of the biggest reasons of failure is when the training for these challenges competes with life. It becomes a battle. And so what we want to do is leverage off season now to define the challenge, commit to it, and then put the pieces in place that can start to prepare your body for the hard work ahead. So it doesn't need to be demanding from a time standpoint right now. It doesn't need to be overwhelming, but you start to think about the planning phase of it, doing some of the training to strengthen the tendons, muscles, and ligaments. Start to integrate some of the habits around good practices of eating, trying to dial in your sleep as much as you can around holiday parties, making sure that you're getting organized so that when you do go into the new year, you don't feel like you're behind the eight ball. You don't feel like you need to accelerate quickly, because that is another reason that athletes really struggle. Beyond the competition, if the deadline is quite soon, then they start to move to panic. They try and go from zero to hero. They layer on training over 6 weeks. They feel the validation, and then they start to get the niggles, pains, and injuries, and they hit that cycle all the way through, and it makes the journey less enjoyable. But more than that, the chances of success are radically reduced. So the short answer is now. Start to think about it now. Start to define it, and then don't turn on the faucet and go. Give yourself 6, 8, 10 weeks to prepare the body. You're not driving fitness. You're just layering the foundational elements so that when you do start to drive the fitness, the body and mind is ready to go. That's the spirit of what we look at.
The spirit of the mindset challenge.
The spirit of the mindset challenge. That's what we like.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Any last thoughts on this, Matt?
My only last thought is I mentioned that the physical challenge is important, and I think a little bit of context of that is important. Why do I love physical challenges? Well, I'm a coach, so that's going to be one reason. But I see this time and time again, and particularly if you're watching or listening right now and you don't identify as an athlete, the truth is that you could get challenged by learning an instrument or joining a theatre group. That's plenty of challenge. But there's something different with physical challenges. And I think that the key is physical challenges provide embodied learning. And so you're actually living it. So when we think about stamina or our limits or even setbacks, you have to kind of live through these. And the whole time that you're going on this journey of commitment, you're actually getting immediate feedback loops. And you start to understand your limits and you start to feel that. And that is a catalyst for confidence because it's so visceral. And it provides all this feedback that when you go a little bit further or you get a bit stronger or you take your first strokes in swimming, you start to develop a sense of confidence in your capabilities. And that self-belief bleeds into other aspects of life. And so these are things that are just really helpful to us as human beings. And it becomes why you hear so many dedicated athletes that love it so much. They don't just do this stuff for their egos. It gives them more. It actually becomes the fabric of who they are. And I'm not talking about just because you get tattoos of the discipline or the sport that you do on your body. I'm saying that doing this, it provides accomplishment. It provides goal. It provides progression. But more than that, it helps you as a human being. And that's really powerful. And that is a wonderful journey that when you see people finish their first marathon, their first Ironman, their first 5K, the reward is so much greater than the finish line. And you can't understand it until you do it. So make this the year to do it. Because once you learn it, you never turn back. and it becomes a catalyst to, I think, magnify and make our big lives even bigger.
I am going to go and look at event calendars right now and see what I need to sign up for.
That's what I hear. We'll partner with you and help you get there.
Great talking to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Allison.
Thanks for listening to Endurance Unlimited. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on your platform of choice to never miss new episodes. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star rating to let your coach and the algorithm know you're ready to dial in your training. Find more resources to help you take on your next challenge at TrainingPeaks.com or find us on social media at TrainingPeaks. Got questions? Leave a comment or send an email to podcast@trainingpeaks.com. Good luck in whatever you're training for, and trust the process to reach your potential.